did that on purpose. And I really want to talk about my kind of passion for APIs. I have a background in web development, and this is where I've been spending a lot of my time over the last couple of years, and I'm really excited to be here and share it with you. I would ask you, I really like participation. So if you feel like shouting something out or having some fun, thank you. I saw some people grab some balls, the yellow cushy balls. I have a couple up here I plan on chucking out at you guys if I ask a question, someone answers it, or if I just feel like hitting someone for fun. So feel free to participate. I'll ask you maybe to stand up, to raise your hand, or to clap or something like that. Please help me out and do that. I kind of want to start off with, does anyone recognize this t-shirt?
Sure.
What is it?
It's football.
Football?
Football.
What team? Detroit City. We'll give you a ball. You want a ball or you want a frisbee?
I want a ball.
You get a ball. So this is the Detroit City FC Le Rouge football team. I'm a big fan of soccer. I grew up playing soccer my whole life. It's been a big part of who I am. And they have a chant. And I asked for participation, right? You guys want to do a chant with me?
Yeah.
Sure.
All right. So the way it goes is I'm gonna say something and you're gonna repeat it back. All right. And the first thing I'm gonna say is I believe, and then you're gonna say I believe, right? And then I believe that, and then you say I believe that, and then I believe that we will win. And then from there we keep going together. We say I believe that we will win. All right. So you guys ready?
Yes.
All right. So I believe.
I believe.
I believe that.
I believe that.
I believe that we will win. 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 Thank you. All right, so you guys still hear me there? All right, so we got a little energy going, and I like to have a little bit of fun. And the reason I wanted to start with that chant is because I really believe that APIs really facilitate us to be more creative, have more flexibility, and help create a community with all of us to work together and to supply services that we can consume and use for really new, awesome purposes. So that's going to be the first part of our talk, is really driving home the reason why APIs are important, that if you're building an application, to really think about, hey, is there something we can abstract out here and to turn it into something that we can reuse for a later purpose, or to open up for other people to use at a later time. The second half of the talk, we're going to cover some development strategies around how do we go about building an API. We won't get into really telling you about how REST works or what hypermedia really is. We'll talk around that a little bit. But this is going to be more about the conversation that you have with your fellow engineers or your friends, or even yourself. If you're working by yourself, the mindset that you might need to make that successful. A little background about myself. I said I work downtown here at Quicken Loans. I've been here for 5 years, and I love it. How many, is this your first time here in Detroit? Couple? First time here in a Quicken Loans building? Okay, that's a pretty good crowd. I mean, if you turned around, people in the front, I'd say 2/3 of the room raise their hand. Go ahead and raise your hands again if that was you. So a year or so ago, we asked these same questions, and it was always a couple hands, right? And what we're seeing is downtown Detroit really turn around and become an exciting place to visit. And I'm really proud to be a part of that, and I love that we have places like the Madison building where Detroit Venture Partners in the back there, red shirt, woo! It's one of these Frisbees. I'm just going to throw it out there and see what happens. Incomplete pass, sports. If you get a chance, stop by the booth. I'm sure she'll share some really cool things that are happening inside that building. And I'm a part of the Node meetup group, the sticker on my laptop there, where we meet up there every couple of months. We talk about Node. We do some hacking on some Node applications and share like API development strategies, because APIs and Node kind of go together. Also, today, if you get a chance to go down to Campus Martius, go do it. It looks like it's okay day out. It's been kind of crappy, but thank you for being here. I'm really excited. And some more background is I have a background in web applications. And that's what I've done my whole life. I've always built web apps. And I've been really trying out Node for the last few years, and recently I released an application that has a Node API supporting an Angular.js front end. It's my very first public application with an actual RESTful API and a single page app using Angular. And I'm really excited about it. I've been goofing around for a little bit on it, and I'm excited to share it with you today, which is my super handy, duper awesome flex fuel calculator. Do you guys know what flex fuel is?
Yep.
Who in here has a flex fuel enabled vehicle? 7 people, yes. I'm not alone. So when I graduated college and I got my first job, actually here at Quicken Loans, I went and bought my first car. And I'm talking to the salesman, and he says, "Hey son, wouldn't it be a great idea is with increasing gas prices to buy a vehicle that gives you the option to use an alternative fuel?" Wow, that makes sense. Gas prices are going up. I want the flexibility to use something that gives me an option to maybe save some money. So like 12 grand later, paying extra for this engine, I get to the gas pump and I see, oh, regular gasoline's at $4 and flex fuel's at $3.50. I'll use flex fuel. So I put it in my gas tank and I'm driving and I got like half the mileage. I'm like, what the heck? This is supposed to be the greatest thing ever, right? So I did a little research after I paid the extra money and bought the engine, whatever, and come to find out that E85 burns at a very much efficient rate. And in my car, it's actually about 30% less efficient. That's kind of a big deal. So even though it says I'm saving 50 cents per gallon at the gas pump when I go and put the fuel in my car, it doesn't actually mean I'll be saving money. Sometimes I'll actually be spending more money. You don't want to do that. So what did I do? I built an application to tell me which fuel to build, what fuel to buy. And so when I'm at the gas pump, I can type in some numbers. I can type in my the miles per gallon I get for flex fuel, the miles per gallon I get for gasoline, and the price of each at the pump, and I click a button and it tells me which is the better buy, which one I'll be able to travel further with, and which one will help me save money. Well, I built this using, like I said, a Node API, where I type in these numbers, I hit this button, and it's actually posting to an endpoint to then return me a calculation object. And that object has my original inputs, it has a bunch of results, it runs it against an algorithm that tells me which fuel to buy, and it tells, if you were to scroll down on this, you'd see a bunch of different numbers that help me make a decision about which fuel makes sense for me. So why is this important? Why did I go ahead and just build a simple calculator with an API supporting it? Why didn't I just embed that inside of the application itself? And what I really think it stems down to is, one, APIs are freaking sweet, and I just wanted to do one. But really, it allows me to have something reusable and allows me to be more flexible in the future about whatever I want to do with my flex fuel calculator the next time I'm ready to add on to it or do something different. And this is the kind of the stack of what my endpoints look like, my nouns, my verbs, what I send to each endpoint and what I get back. It's just kind of a high level idea for you to see kind of what's behind the scenes running this application. And I don't know what I want to do with this next. That's the point. That's the point of why I built an API. And right now I'm like, hey, why don't I just replicate this in Dart? Just to compare the difference between a regular Angular.js implementation and the Dart Angular implementation. Started goofing around with that, and it was cool, and then I got bored. And then I was like, hey, how about I reuse these endpoints in a different way? And I thought, I really care about figuring out which fuel people are being told to buy on which days or which time of day and which month. So I wanted to start doing some data visualization with Dart. So now here I am. I have an API that's built. It is the core of my application that now I'm consuming in an entirely different way that is displaying data. It doesn't work. I haven't done it yet. But that's what I want to do, and that's the point of having an API behind the scenes, is that it gives you the option, the flexibility to do something new, something different, something creative. And if it was embedded inside the application, I'd have a lot harder time doing that. So let's look around the web and see what else is out there. We have Google+, we have Facebook, we have Netflix. Here, we're going to do that participation thing again. What I'm going to ask you to do is I'm going to ask a question, and if the answer is yes, I want you to stand up and stay standing. All right? You guys do that? All right. How many people have clicked a Google Plus button in the last week? All right, stay standing. How many people have clicked a Facebook like button in the last week? I promise you, all of you will be standing at the end of this. So get used to the fact that you might be standing. How many people have, now wait for the whole question here, have watched Netflix on more than one device? Okay, cool. That was a good one. All right, and how many people have know what these tiles are and have done something with it, like committed code using GitHub, have submitted emails using MailChimp, have stored files using Dropbox, listened to music using SoundCloud on multiple devices, use Flickr to upload images and store them on the cloud? Look at that. Everyone keeps standing. You can't stand more than once, right? All right, go ahead and sit down. Thank you very much. So if you notice, pretty much every single person in here stood up, and probably would have stood up more than once, right? And the reason that these things are so powerful and popular is because they've built a platform, a service that really supports what you saw here. Is all of us interacting with social media, entertainment, taking notes, saving files, emailing people, uploading code, and even doing things like code hooks that when I do a pull request, that it automatically deploys my code. All those are built on APIs that we can use. And if they didn't do that, then we'd be up a creek, right? We wouldn't really have a lot of this cool stuff if they didn't open that up to us to allow us to start consuming for the applications that we're building. We're building businesses based on a lot of these platforms. The very first talk that we saw with Godfrey, he talked about Chrome extensions. And one thing he talked about is, hey, you can hit some services and then display them in these Chrome extensions. Well, you wouldn't be able to do that unless they're available to us. And what these businesses are doing is they supplied a platform for us to use and to consume and to get creative with. Now let's go at Google. Let's look at Google. Google has so many services that we can use. Many of us use them on a daily basis. Google Drive, I've uploaded files from my phone, from my computer, from my tablet, and I can access those files because they basically created interfaces that are hitting these services and allowing you to interact with that data. Analytics just released kind of the new version of analytics, which I'm a big fan of right now. Has anyone tried out the new analytics suite yet? One hand, 2, 3, popcorn. We're having popcorn happen right now. Me. Well, something I really like about the new analytics library or whatever is I can drop it in, like before, I can drop it in my application. But now I feel like it's a lot more simplified, where I just call the same method, GA, and I pass it a parameter, a string telling it, hey, call an event, call a page view, and here's some data along with it. It really simplified, I think, my implementation on my applications using their library that they provided for us. But that's an API, right? But let's go look at maps. How many people have, what we'll do is just hands. I'll be easy on you right now. But just show of hands, how many people have implemented Google Maps ever? That's pretty good showing of hands. How many people have used Google Maps ever? Okay, cool. That's better. So Google Maps, I'm going to kind of make up the development lifecycle of Google Maps on the fly here, right? So maybe it started out like this. Our goal is to be able to type in a point or type in an address and then display that point on a map. That's the first objective, right? And here we have, I typed in the address, the Cube. This is the Cube building. If you didn't know where you're sitting today, this is called the Cube in downtown Detroit. And that's like the first endpoint. So on the FlexGo calculator, I said, hey, here's a bunch of endpoints. So maybe their first endpoint is return longitude, latitude coordinate of an address, right? So I hit the service, it returns longitude, latitude, and then I'm able to then display a point overlaid on top of a map. Cool, we got our first endpoint. Second endpoint, I want directions. I want to be able to tell you, Google Maps, a point A and a point B, and I want to not just get the longitude, latitude of those points, I want you to tell me routing information that I can then overlay directions on a map to tell me the best path or multiple options about how to get from A to B. And this is my path this morning. How many of you are from Southeast Michigan here? Pretty good showing. You guys know about the 96 closure? So for those of you who aren't from Southeast Michigan, maybe on your way down here, you stumbled across this big stretch right here. Well, this is where I live. This is where I go to work every day, right? And there's this big thing in the middle that's just closed. And so then it changed my commute from 30 minutes to maybe an hour. But it's no big deal. But it tells me all that information. And here's our second endpoint, right? And then we got this really cool feature called Street View, right? So I can take my little Pegman guy down there in the lower corner. I can drop him pretty much anywhere in the world, and I can see a 360 view around me of what I'm looking at. If you didn't guess, that's the Cube again. That's where out front, if you look up, that's what it looks like, right? You can even turn right, and you can see some guy riding a bicycle. You can turn left. You can sometimes see someone moving the camera, right? I think there's websites dedicated to the funny things people find on Street View, right? See some head nods. But why am I talking about maps? Why am I talking about maps as an example? And really it gets down to the flexibility, reusability, and the creativity that we're enabled with an API like this. So last week I went to Florida on vacation. I was at the airport at 5 or 6 in the morning, and my plane was delayed. I was frustrated, grumpy. I didn't have my coffee yet. I've had 3 coffees today. That's why I have so much energy. That all changed when I was just on my phone. I was looking up some things for this conference about some cool Google Map APIs or Google Map implementations, and I found this. It's called Plane Finder. And what it does is it's using the Google Maps API to then overlay in real time images of an airplane as it's flying through the air. And this blew my mind. I was like, so you're telling me that an airplane in the left corner there that's in Detroit Metro, the one flying right there is about to land? I don't believe you. So I went up to the window, I'm up at the glass, looking around, right? See a little light in the distance, I'm like, that's not this airplane, come on. It was that airplane. It landed, it said delayed, and then it said arrived, and it blew my mind. And this is really the power of APIs, right? It allows us to come up with ideas that we never thought of in our original pursuit of whatever we're building. Right now, you might be building a great idea, an application that you're going to put on the Android Play Store or iOS store or wherever, or just on the web. But if you think about it, if you can figure out a way to abstract out a piece of it, it becomes a platform that then you can reuse later. It allows your future implementations to be that much easier, and you can get really creative with it, like these guys. The next example is this one. It's called Map Dive. Has anyone played this game? Raise your hand if you played this game. One person. We should hang out. We're friends. MapDive is using the same exact API that started out where it showed me a point on a map to now I want to overlay a game on top of Google Maps. I want to show a map underneath me, and this is New York. This is the map of New York, and what it is it has it's overlaid some points above the map. And you can hit your inputs. You can hit left, right, up, down. It also uses the mouse cursor. You can control it with that too. And what really blew my mind, Don, the guy up here, I was talking to him about this, and he's like, oh, I played that. And he played it with the Kinect. He would fly around like this, right? And he's flying, he's controlling the guy, making him go left and right and hit these points. And that was really, really cool, right? But here we are again. Someone got really creative with an idea that someone wanted to create a game using the Google Maps API that as I turn right, we rotate that map right, and also if I rotate left, I would go left, and then I want to put points in space around that map. And do you think Google really thought that's the end game of Google Maps? No, I don't think so. But the fact that they've created a platform for us to consume and get creative with, this is where really the power and why APIs are a big deal, right? I covered that. Stripe. Raise your hand if you know what Stripe is. I want to read this so I get it right. So this is on their homepage, a set of unified APIs and tools that instantly enable businesses to accept and manage online payments. That's what they do. They essentially are an API that processes payments for me, an application developer, right? So if I build an app, if Flex Fuel Calculator takes off and it's become so popular that people are willing to pay me $1 a month to use it, I'm probably going to use something like Stripe because they make it so easy for me to take their Node API and drop it into my application and just call some methods that process the payments for me. And that's their entire business model, is that concept. So if I go ahead, here's an example. Again, I'm using the Node version because I'm a Node fanboy. And we're looking at the method for creating a new charge. And in the middle here, you'll see Stripe charges create. That's my wrapper method, which essentially is calling out to the Stripe API and is passing this data that I'm telling it to pass, the credit card number, all that jazz. And then on the left is really the definitions of what those parameters are, if they're required or not, and then what the types are, right? In the very bottom, you'll see the response. That's what I get back, and then I can display back to the user, hey, your credit card failed, sorry, bad news, or incorrect year, or whatever. That's where I'm getting the data. But they've made it so simple for me to process online payments that in my Flex Fuel Calc, if I were to go ahead and build an Android version of it, I can use the Java SDK, or if I wanted to roll my own API handler, I can go ahead and use curl and hit their API myself. So fun fact too is that Stripe, they just went through their last round of funding, or not last round of funding, another round of funding, and they raised $80 million. That evaluates to worth of $1.75 billion. So there's another reason why APIs are a big deal. Their whole business is an API, right? They supply it to us. They take a little tiny fraction of the money, and they do all this easy lifting for us, and that's their whole business. So hopefully that catches on. If the game didn't, maybe this did. So how did Stripe, how did Google go ahead and create something that's simple, it's reusable, it's flexible, it's powerful, creates communities, and it really helps us. And I really believe that they had the help of aliens. No, not really. I love this guy. Anyone watch this show? Or the shows that he's, yeah. We'll talk later. All right, so really, what are some development strategies for designing an API? What I want to do is I want to tell you 3 stories. And these are 3 stories that I'm sure many of you are familiar with or you've participated in, and maybe you'll be able to envision past experiences where you've done these things. I know I have. And the first story I want to tell is called The Story of the Great Napkin. And this story goes that I'm going to use my buddy Alan. So my buddy Alan and I, every couple of months, one of us goes, hey, I have an idea. Like, okay, cool, I love ideas. Let's go have some fun. So we'll go out to the bar, we'll have a few drinks, and we solve the world's problems. We create our MVP of what this super application is going to be. We write all of our endpoints down, just like we have in the FlexFuel calculator. Here's our nouns, here's our verbs, here's the data we're going to send it, here's the data we're going to pass back. And then we go off our separate ways, and he, the API engineer, goes and builds the API, and I, the application engineer, go build the application, all based off of notes we took on a napkin. Now, that's not really how a lot of the conversations go, but what it simulates is us just having a conversation with our fellow engineers, and we don't do a good job of communicating and establishing a good methodology for us to build a successful API. Because what will happen in this is I'll go away for a month and a half, he'll go away for a month and a half, and we'll come back together, we'll merge the two, and it blows up. Right? Have you guys experienced this before, that you go to plug this, we call it wiring up the service, wire up the service, right? We go to wire up the service and it doesn't work. The assumptions I made, the application engineer, are way different than the assumptions you made. We said it's going to return an array, but did you mean an associative array or did you mean just an array? How am I supposed to iterate over this? Those are the decisions that happen when you're actually developing an API. And you're just like, I don't know where it's going to work, it just should work. So that's really the, thanks Brian. And you're wrapping your brain, you're trying to figure out what happened. And so that's just an example of bad communication and not really having a strategy around developing an API. This next story is what can we do a little bit differently to make things more successful, and it's something that Alan and I recently did, and it seemed to work pretty well. And this is called The Story of the Drawing Board Wrestlers. That's the best title I could come up with for this story, I'm sorry. But this cartoon kind of illustrates how I think this conversation goes. It's the same deal. One of us has an idea, Alan and I go into a room, and we go up to one of these whiteboards and we're drawing up, I think that this endpoint should be, all endpoints should be plural. We should name them all cars, not car, right? And he's like, no, they should be singular. And we have this feud, we have this battle, we have this thumb wrestling match, and then all of a sudden I do the little sneak attack with the finger, and he's like, no, that's illegal, you can't do that. And then we kind of figure out what the heck this thing's going to look like, right? We have we do our battle. He says, we're not going to use put for updating objects. We're going to use patch because that's the correct thing to use. And I get really upset because I don't like patch, but whatever. He won that one. I won the plural battle. We're good. But that's what this battle's all about, is you're up on the whiteboard. And there's nothing really different from this step, from the story of the Great Napkin. What's different is what we did next. And what we did next is this is actually the drawing of our whiteboard right here. We went up here, and this is the brain of what the application is going to be, right? This is our idea. And then we're like, okay, here's the API that we're going to build, and here's our nouns, and here's our verbs, and here's the endpoints, and our data associations. And I'll even zoom in for you there. There it is again on the right. And what we did different is we went ahead and we actually built the endpoints immediately. So we went from this conversation. We both took a picture, so we have our napkins. But the difference is Alan went and created all these endpoints, and it just returned mock data to me. And so what I have is I now have, as the application engineer, I have live services that I can hit. So instead of me creating mock services that return mock data in my application, I now am using Alan's version of it, so that we don't have two versions going on with my assumptions and his assumptions, right? And so what that allows us to do, why is that better, is if he makes an assumption that this needs to be an associative array, and he makes that change, and I made a different assumption of how I'm going to get that data, and it breaks, we can fix it right away. I can reach out to Alan and say, hey, why did you make that decision? And he'll give a reason, and then I'll have to figure out how to fix it. Or he'll say, oh, I actually assumed that that's what you wanted, and it turns out that's not the case. And the reason I like this is because in the first example, when things blow up, it's at the end. You're a month and a half in. You're 2 months in. You're 3 months in, right? You're at the finish line, or so you thought. And right? And then it turns into, we just got to get this out the door. Let's, I don't know, let's change the types a little bit, or let's change that array, and now just duct tape this thing over here just so we can get it out the door. And it's not a great experience because now you have this duct tape gross pile of spaghetti code that you never intended to release, and now here it is, it's supporting your production application. But in this, you can fix those things along the way, right? You can make sure it's correct. And as we make decisions, if I'm the application engineer and I'm reading my picture that I have right here on my phone, and I'm implementing this part of the application, and I'm like, oh, that's not going to work. I can reach out to Alan and say, we need to rethink this endpoint. Don't finish up the HTTP response codes or the error handling stuff yet. Let's revisit this endpoint because it's going to affect everything down the chain. It's going to affect all my data associations and how I'm iterating over the stuff to display my user experience for the application. Does that make sense? So this third story. This third story is something I'm playing around with right now. It's a little different, and it's called Imagination Land. Any South Park fans out there? That's it? South Park dead? Am I the last South Park super fan? No? All right, good. There's a few of us left. So, how many of you have seen this episode, Imagination Land? How come there's more hands that went up that saw this than actually watched, know what South Park is, right? That's fooling me. So Imagination Land, if you haven't seen it, I really like this episode because there's every single evil character in South Park shows up during the Imagination Land episode. You have the evil woodland critters, you have Man Bear Pig, which is one of my favorite evil characters of all time. He's half man, half bear, half pig, or half man, half bear pig, or half bear, half man pig. I don't know, I don't remember. But in this, you have to sing a song to get into Imagination Land, and it's pretty amazing. No, I'm not going to sing it for you. But what Imagination Land is I was sitting down with a friend at QL, and we had a problem. And he gave me a response which made my face look like this. And our problem was we wanted to make sure that the application we're building, the services, followed a specific pattern. And it was RESTful, and it really worked for us. And at the time, we were kind of getting yanked in a bunch of different directions, and it was really tough to make sure that this stuff would work. And he said, try this. Try app-first development. App-first development, what's that? And that's how I responded. I'm like, I don't get it. Because, I've been to conferences, I've read books, I've read articles about API-first development, right? Build the API, so that you have something that you can use in to build an application around. And the concept that Matt shared with me is called app-first development. I don't know if that's actually the name of it. If you know what the real name of it is, please let me know after this, because I want to start doing a lot more research on it. Well, I'm going to try my best to explain to you what app-first development is. Really what it is if I were to take my FlexField calculator, and instead of me building all those endpoints out and then building an app around it, I build my app literally first. So if I have my endpoints, my first one is to create a car. The first thing I would do is build an interface, and I'd have a form, and I'd say, I want to collect a make, a model, and a year. When I hit that button, I want to post to an endpoint those 3 data points, and I want it to return to me a car object. And then I want to display back to the user some experience. I want to display that it's a Ford Escape 2010. That's my car, by the way. It's pretty sweet. It's got 4-wheel drive. And then what I do with that is much like what Alan did is he went ahead and created these endpoints that return mock data. I would then either create a mock service in my application that returned that mock, or I would go ahead and create an endpoint which returned that mock. And instead of me going ahead and building all those endpoints and all those mocks for me to hit from the beginning, what I can do is kind of create a blueprint of what my API is going to look like. Why is that good? What does that solve? Why does that make sense? Well, for me, it makes a lot of sense because there were a couple problems that Alan and I had that I think this helps with. And the first problem is that assumption of what those data types are, what I'm sending him, what he's returning me, and it really kind of makes an exact version or exact napkin notes of what we need to build. And what we can do is, as the application engineer, I'm running up against this idea that, hey, I don't actually need a year for my car. I don't really care about that. I'm going to change that on the fly. I can rapidly prototype my API on the fly. And then I can make those decisions and I can fix those problems before I ever spent any time working on it in the first place. The second problem I think that this fixes is, so you remember this picture? This picture was Alan and I, we had this idea, we solved the world's problems, we created a bunch of endpoints. And if I were to ask you how many of the endpoints did we not use, what would your answer be? 80%? Okay.
A third.
Third? A third. You ball or frisbee? Frisbee. We ended up throwing out a third of those endpoints. We didn't use them. How many endpoints did we end up having to create that we didn't even think of yet? A third. This guy. And that's another problem I think that app-first development helps with is, since I'm getting an exact blueprint of what my API is going to be, I know what I need to build to facilitate the very first version of the application I'm about to support. And I think that's really cool, because then I can turn around, take that blueprint, and rapidly produce the API, and I don't really need to run into anything, because I know everything up front. Figured it all out. It's pretty cool. I haven't done it successfully yet. I'm trying right now. Has anyone done this before? 1, 2.
You're describing really data first.
Data first?
Right.
Why is that?
Because when you're saying at first and you're getting the form with what you want, that's data.
Yep.
You integrate data structure first.
What if I don't know what it is? How many of you know exactly what your application is going to be the first time you build it?
It's the same thing as at first, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you know what you're going to get. You need to abstract the data. The data in the sense of ERD.
Mm-hmm.
Remember ERD last millennium?
Yeah.
Bring it to the 21st century.
Yep.
And that's what you need to do. You need to create your basic data object.
Mm-hmm.
Users, cars,
Mm-hmm.
and whatever, and what have you.
Well, I agree, 100%.
Isn't that what you're doing?
Yep.
Really?
Yep. So he's talking about data first, right? And yeah, that's true. My strategy for going about figuring out what data I need is building the application I want to build in the first place, because I don't know exactly what I want my user experience to be, but it's helping me to find the data structures that I need to then build my API. Right.
Yes, and my experience is that what we have always done for the last 10 years is to mock a whole bunch of pages, which produces the data structure.
Yep. So today, we covered these two ideas, right? Really why APIs are really, 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 really important, right? We drove it home with Google Maps API. I showed you the coolest API in the world, the Flex Fuel Calculator, that I know you're all excited to go check out and use. The 7 of us who have Flex Fuel cars, right? Maybe you'll go buy a Flex Fuel car because of this, who knows?
I think you might be missing the one real
One really, yes, I need 30 reallys. That's what I need. And then we talked about Stripe and building entire businesses around APIs that really are powerful and can help support us. And what they do is they allow us to be more flexible, have a way of reusing APIs, our core business, in ways that we never thought of before, like the Google Maps implementation of the real-time airplanes, the game, or the data visualization of the flexible calculator that I showed you in the beginning. And then the second thing we talked about is just a couple stories around the being in a black box for a month and merging it together and having it blow up and kind of what that turns into. And then we got into the second story, which is creating these endpoints immediately for us to return that mock data, right? And then we got into that third story where we just talked about something different that I'm trying out right now, which is, I think, pretty cool. But if you are new to APIs, if you don't really know what nouns or verbs or endpoints are, this is where I started. And this is a book called Web API Design, Crafting Interfaces That Developers Love. And Ryan Malloy, he works at Apogee down in Detroit at the Madison. He's one of the companies at the DVP, part of the DVP group. And I still reference this book to get clarification on URL structure, strategy. They talk about plural versus singular nouns. They talk about all your verbs, your gets, your posts, your puts, your deletes. And I thought this was a great place to start, and I still use it to this day. If you prefer videocast, if you were to just look up that title, you'd find a videocast of that. A very similar talk from Brian. I think he tweaked it a little bit, but for the most part, it's the same content. But I really enjoyed this, and that's it. Today, the lunch is going to be served over there, and I'm going to stay back for questions, or if a couple of you have questions right now, I'm here. But thank you. All right, let's go eat.